Hey, I'm Kelly Hogan. If you're brand new here, I don't know if this is the video you should start with. So I usually try to bring really happy, positive carnivore content. I've been a total carnivore myself for about 15 years. That means I eat only animal products. We'll get into that a little bit more in detail in this video. My last two videos, for example, were some of the most positive, beautiful. We laughed, we cried. So good. I'll link to those below. Maybe start there. But this video, I'm not going to try to convince you of what to not say or anyone else. I hope you'll say whatever is your truth, speak your truth, nothing but your truth. But I'm going to tell you five things that you will not hear me personally say because I've just not found them to be my truth or frankly many others. And I'm going to try to say this in a nice way. I'm not going to name names or degrade anyone. I'm just going to tell you five phrases that I hear a lot in the carnivore space that you're not going to hear them from me. That's all I'm here to say. The first one is actually something that I used to say very regularly. And I hear people that I love say it often, and it can be said in a really positive way. So the phrase is carnivore, keep it simple. We just have to keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. You know the keep it simple people? I have always been a keep it simple person. And I'll tell you who those people usually are. People where the simple version worked. Okay. And for a very, very long time, that was me. The reason I said keep it simple is, hello, I just quit eating carbs, started eating meat, and I felt amazing and lost weight. And the more people I started to work with, and the longer I kept saying those words, hey, it's carnivore. So what does simple look like? Keep it simple, man. Just eat meat when you're hungry, and when you're full, just stop eating meat. And then when you get hungry again, do that. And if you're thirsty, just drink water. Keep it simple. And that is amazing advice. If the entire world did exactly that, wow, so much healing would occur. It would be so much better. But, but the longer I work with a lot of people, just here to tell you, there are folks out there that don't feel true hunger. They don't yet feel true satiety. There are people who've been exposed to a lot of toxins, mold toxicity. You can tell them all day long, hey, eat meat, drink water, see you in 10 years. And if they have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, CIRS, and they've been exposed to mold, it's going to take something more than simple to do their healing. All right. There may be a 12-step shoemaker protocol. There are people out there who have gut issues where the keep it simple version with no supplements whatsoever is not going to address some of the root cause issues. There are some folks out there with severe electrolyte imbalances, which, by the way, can come from CIRS. And if you tell them, keep it simple, no one needs electrolytes. Well, I don't. I don't need electrolytes. Never did. I get whatever electrolytes I need from my food. But the longer I live, the more I've come to realize that not everyone is, in fact, me. Okay. So I think the heart behind keep it simple is very good. I think what people are saying is don't overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be. But haven't you ever started what seemed like a very simple project, like a renovation project that seems so simple? We're just going to replace the front door. Simple. We're going to keep it simple because that's what this project is. That happened to me. It was actually our back door at a house a couple houses ago. Uh, hey, Dad, could you help? It's a simple project. We just need to replace the back door. Oh, except when we went to do it, there was rotting wood, and then the door frame didn't fit snug, and it had a tightness to it, so it had to be shaved down, and it got very complicated. It took so much longer than expected. That's a thing, right? So did I just stand there and keep screaming at my dad, Dad, keep it simple, keep it simple? He would have been like, yes, baby. In a perfect world, I would have loved for this to have taken 20 minutes and $20. And here we are having to fix what was not right. Yes. So this is how I have started to rephrase that. The simplest version is always best. when it works. So start there. Try the simplest version. Just cut out carbs, eat meat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, drink water when you're thirsty, and if you're not, you're probably not thirsty. And then if it turns out, oh, except you're chronically dehydrated. Oh, except you have chronic upset stomach, your electrolytes are bad, and you've been having cramps for months, and now you've put on weight. And right, when you find out there's something more going on, please don't keep repeating the mantra to people or to yourself that says, but I should keep it simple. As simple as you need, and also dig as deep as you need to actually fix the problem. All right, the second phrase that I will not say is, hey, you shouldn't have that because that's not carnivore. That's not carnivore. Now, fact is, some things are not carnivore. A kale salad is not carnivore, just like a brontosaurus was not a carnivore. Some animals and dinosaurs were herbivores, omnivores, carnivores. We can categorize animals this way and people that way. I'm not against having a definition of what a carnivore diet is. What I'm more against is prioritizing a label over actual results and what a person needs. So when someone says to me, hey, Kelly, is fill in the blank carnivore, I will typically say, well, it is or is not an animal product. I feel like that's pretty easy. Is that an animal product? Did it have a mother? Did it grow on a tree? Mother, carnivore, or a tree? Not carnivore. Easy, right? But my ultimate question is it serving me well? So if you just simply want to know, hey, do carnivores use stevia? Then I'll be glad to talk through why some of us, as former sugar addicts, do not eat anything sweet. And I'd be glad to talk to you about why some carnivores still do have sweeteners. They eat a big steak and then wash it down with a diet soda. And some of them say they're not having any issues from that, while others of us definitely did. So I don't mind the discussion, but what I don't really love is when people are very dogmatic and say, hey, you're not carnivore if you have, say, the coffee. So I consider myself carnivore because most everything I eat comes from an animal. I do still season my meat with some spices. I do still drink the water that touched the coffee bean. That is coffee. Or water that touched tea leaves. That is tea. I don't let anything sweet touch my tongue ever. And just because it was an animal product, like some people would say honey, because it is sweet, I personally still don't include it. I don't spend a lot of time trying to define, are you hyper carnivore or total carnivore, hardcore carnivore? Are you meat-based, animal-based? I just really would love for people to, first of all, be honest. If you call yourself a carnivore and, you're having 300 carbs of fruit per day, I would say that's an omnivore. That's an omnivore. My husband is an omnivore. He eats a lot of meat and he also eats a side salad with it. Omnivore. Easy. But I don't really care about the label. I would just rather someone say, this makes me feel really good and this works for my body. I just think results and how a person's body reacts to something should always be prioritized more than the label. That doesn't mean labels should also be meaningless, that you can just identify as a carnivore when you eat nothing but kale salad. That's ridiculous. We need language matters. And labels do matter, but they shouldn't matter more than how does it affect you? The third thing you are never going to hear me say, if you have fat on your body, you shouldn't eat any fat. If you have fat to lose, you shouldn't eat fat. I'm never going to say that. First of all, that's not been my experience at all, or the experience of many people I have worked with. Many of us increased our fat and continued to lose body fat, lose body fat. In fact, in 2023, I did an experiment in which every other day for 12 straight weeks, 12 weeks, that's 3 months, every other day, I ate nothing but fat. If I had trace protein, it added up to 20 grams or less per day, every other day. And then on the off days from that, I just did standard carnivore. Just Normal carnivore. It's not like I did pure protein, just burger patties, eggs, steak, the norm. Every other day, pure fat. I was eating tons of heavy cream, carnivore ice cream, creme brulee, egg yolks, mostly beef fat trimmings from the butcher. So much fat. I did not limit my calories. I was just eating as much fat as I wanted. And my body fat, I got super lean doing that. Also, I tell people before you do any experiment like that, I encourage people to make sure that they are still able to lift just as heavy at the gym, and I was lifting, and to make sure that you're measuring somehow your muscle mass. So I'd had a DEXA scan done, and I also have 3 body composition scales, including an in-body scale, which measures body fat and muscle mass. I was making sure that it was my body fat percentage going down and not just losing total weight. Everything was looking great, and I was eating a lot of fat every other day. But my frequent advice when people say, should I have more fat or less fat is, why not try? Many people come to me and say, oh my gosh, I tried low fat carnivore and I got sick. I felt bad. And I said, I tried that too. Why does low fat carnivore not work for most people? Well, you've got 3 macros. As carnivores, we've cut out the carbs. That leaves us with fat and protein. One of those is a great energy source. It's fat. The other one is not. That's protein. Protein is super important. It's a building block, and we need protein. It's required. You will die without it. Same for fat. But fat is the best of the energy sources. So when people go low fat carnivore, you now don't have the carbs for energy and you don't have the fat for energy and for our hormones. So when people go super low fat, they usually feel super low energy. They also tend to get very constipated. Their skin gets dried out. I've tried it. I got mental fog. Anxiety came back. Our brains need fat. So I tell folks, don't let me try to convince you to either eat more fat or less fat. Don't listen to me. But seriously, listen to your own body. If you decide to try a lower fat version of carnivore, be on the lookout for these symptoms because a lot of people have them. And just know that there's a very quick fix. If you start to feel bad, eat some fat. And 1 or 2 days per week of lean carnivore eating does not tend to cause those symptoms for people. So if you wanted to try to incorporate a lean day here or there, you certainly could. But overall, in general, trying a low fat version of carnivore because you say, but I have fat on my body, many carnivores who have lost fat off of their body were also eating a lot of dietary fat. Okay, I'm actually losing count which one I'm on now. I think this is number 4. Here's one you're not going to hear me say. Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Even though that's sometimes true, right? If I were hammering and kept hitting my finger with a hammer over and over and expected that to stop hurting, well, that's insane. If I kept going back to the addictive foods that hurt me, that's the good use of that phrase. Oh my gosh. Well, I keep going back to carbs and expecting a different result, and every single time it tears up my stomach and it gives me cravings and I gain weight and then I'm an addict all over again. Well, that's insane, babe. You got to stop doing that because you keep getting the same results. However, what's the definition of consistency? I have continued for many years doing very similar things, eating meat, taking walks, and there are days where you're not going to see a different positive result. There were long stretches of time where if I was only looking at the overall bathroom scale, nothing was changing. Nothing was improving. There were times when I was even gaining. And a part of me, this voice kept saying, if you're doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, that's insanity. And I was like, but that's also consistency. And I know that in the long run, cutting out carbs and eating meat and getting sunshine and going to bed and taking the walk, I know mentally, I know that that's good. It's just not showing up as a positive result in the way I'm looking for it right now, which was the bathroom scale. So one thing I would say is get a whole lot more ways to look for wins. So if you're walking every day, then your walking is probably going to get you more endurance. You might become a better walker. If you're doing push-ups every day, you're going to get better at push-ups. If you are consistently carnivore, you're going to get better at turning down those carbs, at not having cravings. So you will start to see improvements. Your insulin levels are going to come down. Your A1C is going to improve. Hopefully your joint pain is going away. But it's not always going to show up in a linear way as, wow, I have less body fat and more muscle mass every day than I did the day before. Okay, that thinking is completely, it's not just insane, that's ignorant. It's not going to happen that way. So instead of telling yourself the phrase, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. You could also say that's when it comes to painful behaviors. When it comes to pain, repeating painful behaviors, hurtful behaviors, harmful behaviors over and over and expecting that to ever work out for your good is kind of insane. But when it comes to things that you logically know, you've read the research or you've watched a lot of videos and you know good and well that the 5 pillars of reducing insulin are avoiding glucose spikes by cutting out the sugary processed foods, eating nutritious meats, moving your body, going to bed, and dealing with stress. And you say, okay, those are the things I'm doing. And even though it's not showing up in this one way on my bathroom scale, I'm going to look for more measures of success and know that this is also the definition of consistency, is continuing to do positive behaviors even when I'm not seeing a different result. Okay, the last one is the most controversial. Oh, in carnivore world, I feel like the C word is calories. Do calories even matter? If you haven't seen it, I tried to do a really kind, thoughtful walk. I would like to think so. Discussion about do calories even matter? I'm going to link to that below. If you missed it, it was the one that involved my 2 dogs and how I tried to allow my Chiweenie to eat intuitively, and then I allowed my Doodle to eat intuitively. For one of my dogs, it worked. For the other one, it did not. Same for people. So that's a whole separate video. But I gotta say it again. When we continue to say calories don't matter, and I promise you, I promise, I've watched the videos in which I've heard people scream at me to say, not just me, scream at YouTube world to say, calorie is a unit of heat. Your body doesn't even understand the language of calories. Your body doesn't know what a calorie is. So stop saying calories. What, pray tell, would you like me to call it then? Because every tracking app out there is going to call it a calorie. So why do I keep mentioning calories even though I know people hate that. And I kind of do too. I just don't know another way to phrase it. Here's why I keep talking about it. When people show up to me and they're having trouble on carnivore and they say, my hair is falling out and my thyroid numbers are terrible and I cannot sleep and I probably should add back carbs because carnivore isn't working. And then I say, hey, could you just tell me briefly, what does a day of eating look like for you as a carnivore? And they tell me what they eat on a day-to-day basis. For many of us, it's very repetitive, right? So this is easy. I put it into Carb Manager and I say, okay, what else? And they're like, that's it. That's my day of eating. That's pretty much what I do every day. 3 eggs for breakfast, burger patty for lunch, and 5 chicken wings for dinner or something. I'll say, well, that's like 800 calories. And they say, is that it? Because I'm not hungry. That's all I want. I say, that's what you eat every day? You're only eating 800 calories? And this is not a tiny person or a sedentary person? That's not enough food. But how are they going to know that? Because their hunger signals aren't working. So we could call it calories, meat, fuel, Bob, call it whatever you want, but people need a way to mathematically see, hey, that's not enough food. It's no wonder your hair is falling out and you feel awful and have no energy. You don't need carbs, you need food. So yes, calories are the easiest way to say that. Also, when someone shows up and says, hey, I've been doing intuitive carnivore for the past 2 years and I have slowly put on 40 pounds. And then I say, do you have any idea how much you're eating? And they say, no, I was told you don't need to track as a carnivore. Well, you don't have to. That's true. Many don't. But could we just enter a day of eating? And then it turns out that they're eating several hundred calories more than most any TDEE, that's a total daily energy expenditure, that just uses your age, size, gender, and activity level to estimate how many calories you should need for what your body is doing every day. And if you're eating several hundred more than that and you're gaining weight, this is a clear sign that you either have some leptin resistance, because leptin is going to let us know when we're nicely satisfied, or you just have very poor satiety cues for whatever reason. And there are ways to work on that. But to just keep telling people calories don't matter, calorie is a unit of heat, calories, your body doesn't understand calories. Like, okay, but people need a way to quantify, to figure out, am I eating an appropriate amount of food? Just because the person screaming calories don't matter, they may have a very functioning internal fuel gauge. And I love that for them, right? My fuel gauge operates pretty well now too, but I know what it's like to not know when you feel truly hungry, to go through life where everything feels kind of the same, where you get up from a meal feeling exactly as hungry-ish as you did when you sat down. My grandpa was that way. My grandfather died at age 54 of a heart attack. He was diabetic. He did not take treatment for his diabetes. He was a very large man, and his claim to fame in our town was, first of all, people loved him. He was hilarious. So this wasn't his only claim to fame. That man could out-eat anybody. They said his nickname was Jink. Man, we'd sit down and eat with Jink, and he would get plate after plate after plate. The rest of the table would be done for 30 minutes. He'd still be eating. And he would tell people he was as hungry when he got up from the table as he was when he sat down. No shut off. There are folks who get complete healing from that when they switch to meat. I know that's a thing. And there are some folks who don't. They can just eat and eat and eat and eat and gain and gain and gain and gain. And they keep being told, trust the process. And sometimes that works. And sometimes it just doesn't. And if it's been a really long time and you've just been trusting this process without ever once figuring out what are you doing right now, I would say stop shaming yourself over the idea that tracking for a little while or a long while is not carnivore. Because it can be. Carnivores can track. I am a carnivore that has also tracked. And I have no shame about it whatsoever. And I could care less if anybody else out there thinks that's a good idea or a bad idea, because it's, for me, has been helpful. And instead of tracking, sometimes the advice is, I've heard both of these things this week. Everybody needs to eat at least 2 pounds of meat per day. And the other advice I've heard this week is this is a new one to me, everybody should eat 1 pound of meat per day plus a stick of butter. So I did the math. Well, if you're eating skinless, boneless chicken breast, 1 pound of that per day plus a stick of butter, that is just shy of 1,600 calories. And that might be perfect for you. I don't know. And if you're eating 1 pound of beef short ribs per day plus a stick of butter, that is about 3,000 calories per day. And that might be perfect for you. I don't know. So what is the 1 to 2 pounds of meat? What kind of meat are we even talking about? Because that's a big difference. Have you ever tried to eat 1 pound of pork belly plus a stick of butter? That would be very hard to do, maybe even in the course of an entire day. Pork belly is so high in fat and so filling. And if you were to try to eat 2 pounds of pork belly every day, whoa, to tell someone that's your minimum, well, does it even matter if this person is 70 years old and sedentary, 5 foot nothing, and tiny, or a large grown man that's lifting weights 5 hours a week, ripped with muscle, has low insulin, and is very active? I would say this does matter. But to throw out this whole everybody needs a pound of meat and a stick of butter, and everybody needs 2 pounds of meat per day, the two people I just described probably have very different needs. So while it's probably a really great place for someone to start, take someone on a standard American diet and tell them probably any of this advice. Eat 2 pounds of meat per day and nothing else. That's great advice for someone on a standard American diet. Hey, cut out all those carbs and eat 1 pound of meat per day plus a stick of butter. Yes, that is awesome advice. Tell them, hey, cut out the standard American diet and keep it simple. Just do carnivore. Yes, That is great advice. Also, when you do that, don't worry about the calories. Just eat meat. Amazing advice. So, in other words, all of these things have an appropriate context. But when we continue yelling, keep it simple, eat 2 pounds of meat per day, calories don't count. The only one I would say is probably very poor advice for everyone is if you have any body fat, then you shouldn't eat fat. We all, if you're a human, you need to eat some dietary fat. That doesn't mean you need as much as I do. Doesn't mean you need to stick of butter per day. It just means if you're feeling really lousy and you're not, especially if you're not eating carbs, then yes, you should eat dietary fat. And I don't care how much fat is on your body. That's not going to prevent you from losing any fat. I know, I had to go back to that for a second. But most of these phrases have a really appropriate place. And it is mostly when we are trying to get people off of processed, sugary junk. Then yes, keep it simple. Eat lots of meat. Do not fear the fat. Do not worry about calories. Just do the simplest version of carnivore. And then when we get to someone where they say, gosh, I've been doing that for a really long time and my hair is falling out and my thyroid is suffering and I can't sleep well and I have no energy and I'm struggling. I've gained a lot of weight trying to trust my intuition. And then we just keep saying those same phrases to them. That's when I say, hey, it's also okay to make this a little more complicated, to look at your fuel intake to make sure that you're eating an appropriate amount of meat for your age, size, gender, and activity level. It's okay to make this a little bit less than simple, at least for right now. And you might not need 2 pounds of pork belly per day. So let's get into the weeds and figure it out. Yeah. So I'm not here to bash anybody for saying those things. I can almost guarantee you I have said all of them at some point. In fact, when I was trying low-fat carnivore, I probably would have said, hey, I'm losing weight because I quit eating so much fat. That was a very, very long time ago before I was saying anything. I was just doing my own little almost carnivore thing, and I was also not feeling well. So that advice has not come out of my lips in a very long time. But the rest of it, I do think it has a place. Hopefully, this gives a little context as to why I personally will not be saying those. And if you still stand behind it 100%, I'm sure you have your reasons as well. And don't worry, we can still be friends. It's all good. If you need any support or help figuring these things out, or if you say, wow, I love the simple version, I'd love to work with someone who has lived that before. Yes. If you say, wow, I'm still struggling with carbs and sugar addiction, I'd love to work with someone who has been there before. Yes. I have been obese. I have been addicted. I have struggled. I have tried the low fat, the high fat, a lot of different ways. I've been intuitive and I've also needed to track. So if you need help with any of those things, I'd love to work with you. Having a group definitely helps. And if just hearing the free versions here on YouTube is enough for you and keep it simple is working, please feel free to speak your truth in the comment section, no matter what that is. As complicated or as simple as it is, I promise you, whatever version is truly working for you and serving you well right now, I'm all for it. I applaud you. Okay. Take care. Have a great day. See you next time. Bye.